Hi guys, welcome to a new lecture on our third of the three key civilizations. We've done the barbarians, at least the Frankish kingdom, those Germanic barbarian tribes. We have done the Byzantine Empire in two parts, and this one will be a two-parter as well, but this is the first part, and it is about Islam. We're going to be covering the Islamic empires um, after this. But now we're just going to give you a little background about this amazing religion that, again, no one could have predicted would have been there. No one could have predicted the rise of Islam. It's just one of those things in history that is quite mysterious. There's no way to tell something like this could have happened and spread as rapidly as it did. So let's get into it, guys. First thing, I'm going to give you a little background, most of which you're already familiar with. I'm sure in other classes you've talked about this material about Islam. And the first one, of course, is the five pillars of Islam. So this is going to give you a little background about what the people of Islam believe, um, who live out their faith. Uh, they have the Arabic names with them, but you don't have to know the Arabic names, guys. You just have to know what each one of them is. And essentially, Shahada is the Islamic creed, and it means the creed there is there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. That's it. If that is your statement of belief, then you belong to Islam. If you think about it, guys, that's a lot less complicated than our Nicene Creed, which we say every Sunday at Mass. It's a lot more complicated, a lot more theologically involved than this creed. But this is essentially the Islamic creed, the Shahada. The Salah is prayer. It was one of the pillars of Islam, and there is standard prayer 5 times a day. They will face toward Mecca on their prayer mats and pray a series of prayers, and that's 5 times daily. And there's also a call to public prayer at noon on Friday, and they will pray together. Zakah is to give money to the poor and unfortunate. We just call that almsgiving. And Psalm is the fasting, and that is particularly prevalent in the holy month of Ramadan. And that includes fasting from sun up till sundown. And then you can eat a fair amount, but from sun up to sundown, you are not to have any food at all. Then there is the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage. And at least once in your lifetime, if you're able, you are asked to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, which is the holiest city of the Islamic religion. Then there is Sharia law, another fascinating subject. And what is Sharia law? It's basically secular law. It's law for the state, but it's based on the Quran. All right. So it would be like us taking our modern secular law code, the United States law, from biblical sources. We do to a certain extent with the Ten Commandments, but Sharia law is based truly on the Quran. And there are certain precepts, and what are they? One is no gambling. So even though March Madness got canceled this year, no person who follows Islam could make a bracket. There's no eating of pork. Pork is considered an unclean meat. You cannot drink alcoholic beverages. According to the religion of Islam. So when the United States troops were stationed in Saudi Arabia, the way they got around that, and since they were stationed in an Islamic country, is for the purposes of the government. That territory was United States territory, and therefore the territory where the troops were located was considered this territory of the United States, and therefore they could have alcoholic beverages on that territory. Otherwise, Islamic countries do not allow alcoholic beverages. There's no lying, which is, we say, okay, so what? That's the 8th commandment. Do not bear false witness. But it's interesting that in Islam, it's restricted to lying to fellow Muslims, fellow followers of Islam. You can lie to a non-believer if it's going to further the cause of Islam. And in Islam, you can have up to 4 wives. Muhammad had 9, but the other followers of Islam can have 4 wives. So you're not restricted as you are in Christianity to a monogamous relationship for life. Marriages are prearranged by the parents. of the couples, which is a very interesting subject. And I know many people who have arranged marriages and have gotten on quite nicely over the years. Um, and contact between unmarried men and unmarried women is greatly discouraged in the Sharia law. All right, now let's talk about the history of Islam. What was the Arabian Peninsula like? That is where Islam was born. What was the Arabian Peninsula like before the time, or at the time of the Prophet Muhammad? Okay, so what was it? It was a land of basically nomadic tribes, um, polytheistic tribes. They believed in many gods. And these nomadic tribes often, frequently invaded more civilized territory like the Byzantine Empire and Persia, never for conquest, just for raids. And because of that, because of their ways of just going in for raids and not actually establishing any kind of civilization, they were considered both uncivilized and somewhat backward in their society, almost savage by some people, okay, by the neighboring civilizations. Now that said, they still had resources that were valuable to the civilized world, and there were trade routes that linked Mecca, the most important city on the Arabian Peninsula, to the Byzantine and the Persian worlds. So that is there is contact between them, between those worlds. And Mecca, by the way, even though it is the place where you are to go for your pilgrimage, according to the pillars of Islam, prior to that, it was also a place of pilgrimage as well. But the Kaaba, which the people who visit Mecca circle around, there was a similar building there, and it housed 360 idols. Many said that it was because they each represented a different day of the year, and the people of the Arabian Peninsula would come and worship those idols in Mecca. So now we're going to go on to Muhammad himself, the founder of the Islamic religion. So who was Muhammad? Well, Muhammad was born into a lesser branch of the Meccan nobility. There were noble families back then, even in those nomadic tribes, and he was born into a lesser branch, not as high nobility, but low nobility. And at the age of 25, he married a wealthy woman, 40 years old, a widow, and he was actually his employer. He was employed as a caravan trader. And she employed him and married him. He was one of her caravan traders. They had 5 children, one of whom is named Fatima, who was the one surviving child. We'll talk about that later when we get to the empires of Islam. Muhammad had little formal education. In fact, there are some claims that he was illiterate, and others claim that he wasn't illiterate. But in the tradition of the Quran, when Gabriel asked him, the first words of the angel Gabriel when revealing the Quran to him was read, and he said, I can't read, all right, according to the tradition. But you will see arguments about this, that the things that were written in the Quran that were revealed to Muhammad were written by other scribes. Like I said earlier, Muhammad was a caravan leader, and his trading trips, and this is very important, brought him into contact with Christianity in the Byzantine world, Judaism, also when they traveled to Israel, and there were some Jewish people who lived on the Arabian Peninsula and made a life of trading there, and then indeed with the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism. So Muhammad would have come into contact with all of these religious traditions. Now, somewhere around the age of 40, around the year 2610 AD, Muhammad received his first revelation in a cave from the angel Gabriel. And that's the cave where that first revelation occurred, pictured here on the side of the PowerPoint. And the cave, the angel Gabriel came to him and revealed the words of Allah, which is going to bring us to our next slide in the history of Islam, and that would be the Quran. The Quran is the holy book, their Bible, if you will, of the Islamic tradition. The Quran, according to the tradition, are the words of Allah, the words of God, that were revealed to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel. Yes, the same angel Gabriel who came to Mary at the Annunciation, revealed the Islamic faith, or the Quran in particular, to Muhammad. So what is the Quran? And we will get to this at other points, hopefully when we return to school. I can't wait for that. The Quran is a mixture of Christian, Jewish, and Persian religious traditions. No one really thinks it's an original book, not even among Islamic scholars. They recognize its debt to Christianity, to Judaism, and to the Persian religious traditions that run throughout the Quran. Now, the Quran is divided into chapters similar to our Bible, but this is unique. They're called surahs, and there are 114 surahs, and they're arranged from the longest surah to the shortest surah in terms of length. So we don't really know when the first surah was, the first revelation. There are Islamic scholars who study this question and try to order these surahs in some kind of time frame, but they're just from longest to shortest in the Quran. And this is the supreme authority, religious authority in the religion of Islam. But not only that, it's also the religious authority for questions of law and even for questions of science as well. And if you recall my lecture on the foundations of Western civilization, that this is what evolved that twofold truth, that the truths of science were true and the truths of religion were true, but they didn't mix. There were two separate truths. And that is what Thomas Aquinas fought. He said, no, there's only one truth. Interestingly, Jesus and Mary both appear in the Quran. Jesus is considered an important prophet, but not God. Yet they do believe that he was born of a virgin, that Mary, when Jesus was born, Jesus is known as Isa in the Quran. When he was born of a virgin. And Mary, also known as Maryam in the Quran, there's a great devotion to her within the Islamic community. I remember it was very strange during the first Gulf War when the United States invaded Iraq. I saw images of Muslim women praying before images of Mary, which I found very intriguing. And then, of course, I found out that Mary, there's a great devotion to Mary within Islam. They also believe that Jesus will come before the final judgment to restore justice to the earth. Again, very intriguing little connections between Islam and Christianity. Now, we're going to talk now about the new religion. What actually happened after Muhammad received his revelations, all right? Well, first off, this new religion, Islam, means submission, and that is submission to Allah, all right? And Muhammad is the last of the prophets. There will never be another prophet. He is the seal of a long line of prophets that go all the way back to Moses in the Judaic tradition. Because please remember, guys, the followers of Islam consider themselves children of Abraham, but through the line of Ishmael. All right, the Ishmael was banished along with the maidservant by Abraham and Sarah, and the Arabs are also very often known as the Ishmaelites because they belong to the same religious tradition as the Jewish people, who also see Abraham as the father of their faith. So there's that connection as well. Now, at first, he preached his new religion to his friends and his family, and he gained many followers among his friends and family. But when he tried to go to the larger community of Mecca, it kind of fell flat. In fact, ironically enough, the nobility of Mecca thought that if they went with this new religion of Muhammad's, the pilgrimage trade in Mecca would drop, which is kind of ironic considering that millions of people travel to Mecca every year to make their pilgrimage from around the world. So those people didn't realize, what was going to come afterwards. Now, because of their fear of Muhammad's new religion, the Meccan nobility chased Muhammad away from Mecca. And this is a very critical event in Islamic history. It's the year 622 when this happened. And this flight from Mecca to the city of Medina is known as the Hijra, the flight. And it is the first year of the Muslim calendar. Like our year one is when Jesus Christ was born. Their year one is when Muhammad fled from Mecca to Medina. Now, when he got to Medina, he found his religion was really well accepted there. Um, they loved him. They loved his new faith. He brought the people together. He was known as a very just man, and they sought him for both religious counsel and political counsel. So he was both a religious and political leader. And this is a very unique aspect of Islam. Um, it is both has a religious component but also a political component. They don't have the distinction between church and state the way we have it. In Islam, church and state are essentially one thing. The religious and political foundations of Islam follow that idea. So when Muhammad converted Medina, he got his enthusiastic followers and he said, let's go make Mecca pay for chasing me out. And indeed, they conquered the city of Mecca rather easily, and Muhammad became the leader of Mecca as well as Medina. And over the last 2 years of his life, from 630 to 632, the tribes of Arabia all came and submitted to Muhammad's rule. Submission, remember, is what Islam means. And he dies in the year 632. Now, from 632 to 655, Muhammad goes on. That's my phone in the background, guys. Just ignore it. Muhammad goes on a great deal of conquest in the Near East. He goes to the Byzantine world and he conquers Syria and Egypt. That is in 636, and he takes those away from the Byzantine Empire, and they cease to be Christian countries, and they become part of the Islamic world. The Persian Empire also falls in 637, and you can kind of see that on your map, the expansion there from 632 to, and then North Africa begins to go in 642. The conquest of North Africa. And by 732, Islam controls a territory that goes from Spain to India. It is remarkable expansion. 100 years after Muhammad's death, there is an Islamic world that extends all the way from Spain to India. That is a remarkable thing. And today it even expands into South Asia. Indonesia is an Islamic country. So, I hope you got a lot out of the presentation today. There'll be a second part to the presentation and on the Islamic empires that followed Muhammad. So that will do it for this particular talk. Thank you for listening.